I'm Dr. Randall Smith, and for about the last 25 years I've had the privilege of traveling the lands of Israel, Jordan, Egypt, Turkey, Greece, Cyprus, and Italy as we've been exploring the lands of the Bible. For about the last decade, we've been putting these kinds of journeys on tape, and you'll see now notebooks in hands of students in all of these countries as they begin to study how the places affect our understanding of the Bible. We hope in this series you'll be able to pick up some of that excitement as you see the archaeology and the history and the geography, and as it comes together for your understanding of what the Bible meant to the people that originally experienced God in the text. It's hard to imagine that Nazareth was nothing but a tiny place in the New Testament. I mean, the bustling sounds of this city are all around us, and now you can hear that Nazareth has become what it never was in the New Testament period. Of all of the city lists that we have in Joshua 19 of the cities of the Galilee, Nazareth is not mentioned. In fact, if you take the lists of those sites conquered by Shishak in 928, or even take a look at the ones conquered by the Assyrians in the 700s, Nazareth is not mentioned. In fact, the most important thing about Nazareth is that there's nothing important about Nazareth until Jesus comes. And that's the first time you start to see Nazareth emerge from a very, very bleak past. It was a tiny village, shaped like a long ridge. Was less than a football field wide and maybe 2 football fields long, and just a small series of houses built around the edge of a cliff. A dome top probably had a threshing floor on it. In the sides of this mountain were cave-style homes. These are 3-room cave-style homes. A cave where they extended from the back onto the front, a home. And even today in Nazareth, some of the older homes still have these in the basement areas or the lower areas of the house. At the time of Jesus, Nazareth was a tiny village. Can anything good come out of Nazareth, Nathaniel will say? Because no one had ever heard anything about Nazareth. Imagine maybe a dozen or 24 houses. We're going to take you to an excavation underneath part of the church property of the Church of the Annunciation. The church was actually built in 1968, but we're taking you down below to a cave area of the excavation next to the church. It'll be a little dark in there, but we want to take you underneath to show you some parts of the houses of Nazareth that have been found by archaeologists. Now, the Church of the Annunciation was built in 1968 by Giovanni Muzio, and his intention was not only to build the largest church in the Middle East, it was an absolutely mammoth structure mimicking the size of the earlier Crusader building on that site, but also his intention was to teach the people of Nazareth how to build. And so many of the artisans and craftsmen that come from Nazareth and all the bustling city today actually come from those days of Muzio's teaching them how to actually lay the concrete and build with stone. The church was designed to show the story of the announcement from Gabriel to Mary that Messiah would be born in her. And in fact, when you go inside the lower level of that church, you can see the area of the grotto of one of the cave-style homes. Because it had a church built over it in the Byzantine period and later in the Crusader period, I choose to show our presentation of the homes in one of the cave-style homes next door to that one outside the church property. With a church built around it, it's a little difficult to understand what the New Testament home really looked like. We take you now under the stairs into an area that is closed off by the Archaeological Museum to a small area of some of the houses of ancient Nazareth. You're going to see at least 3 different styles of houses from the time of Jesus. This style is what would be familiar to a person, say, in Bethlehem or in Nazareth or in many villages that are on hillsides where there are caves, okay? So you see there's a natural cave, and in the front of the house they built on an extension. I'd like you to see a wall coming up like this, coming over like this, a low ceiling like this. Remember that the average Israelite was 5'2". I want you to see a door here. And so if you came into my house, you'd be coming in, and this would be the front room of the house. I want you to take your diagram for a moment, and I want you to see the inset diagram of a 3-room cave-style home. Now mine is nice and organized, but caves rarely are nice and organized like that. This one kind of goes back in a funny shape. What you have is a rear area all the way back there. Can you make out that there's like 2 separate areas below here? Not so much the pillars. The pillars are put there because the church is sitting on top of it and we don't want it to collapse. But imagine that there's a back cave area, and a front room. The back cave area is a stable. When it's cold outside, you bring your sheep and goats through the house and you put them in the back of the house. The warmth of the animals helps to radiate heat throughout the home. Now I know some of you are thinking, yeah, but your house will smell like sheep and goats. This is the pre-deodorant era. So do you. Okay? And that's why one of the things I could do if you came into my house at the time of Jesus is I could actually give you the opportunity of putting an oil with a sweet smell in your hair, like kind of Brill cream. And I could do that so that the room smelled nicer. Or I could burn incense in the room. Now, for our purposes, the front room then is the area at the main room of the house. The back room is the stable. The center room is normally a storage room. You remember that in the story in Bethlehem, the story of the birth of Jesus, it says that Joseph and Mary went to the stable because there was no room in the inn. The word inn is kataluma. It's the word for the guest chamber of the family home or the center room. What they're telling you is not that he went to the Motel 6 and was turned away and went to the garage. Great Christmas story, not true. There's no innkeeper in the story. We wrote him in. He's not in the Bible. They're not going to an inn. They're going to a family home. The problem is you can't have a baby right here. This is where we all eat and sleep. It's not appropriate. The middle guest chamber was already taken in Joseph's family home, so they went to the back of the house. It's not, I know there's those wonderful Christmas stories. Go away, we have no room. It's nice, but what they're trying to say is he was in the back of the house. Why does he tell you that detail? Because it means the shepherds, when they went to find him, had to ask house to house because he was in the back of the house and it wasn't easy to find where he was. Okay? What I can tell you about the birth of Jesus is that it's not in a wooden barn, even those nice olive wood sets. It's not a wooden barn. Look around us. We don't have a lot of trees and we don't have a lot of milled lumber. Second, it's not in a place where you're having donkeys and cows because they don't have enough grazing to keep those kind of animals alive in the Bethlehem area. Third, there aren't sheep in the picture because the sheep are with the shepherds in the field at night. Fourth, it's not December because that's the time of year when the sheep wouldn't be out at night. It's a warm time of year. The warm time of year required that, by the way, from about October, November, December, January, February into March, your sheep would never be allowed to be in the field at night because your crops are growing. You will have fat sheep and no winter wheat. They will eat it. But during the summertime, you can take them out and actually bring them out into the fields at night because there's so little to eat, they'll just find something and continue out in the fields. And you can sleep them in little areas that you can sort of bring them in at night just out there in the field. So I know that the time of year is warm, and I know there's no innkeeper in the story. And I know he's not a carpenter, he's a builder. The term tekton, the Greek term for builder, is probably the term for contractor. And since most of our work here is done in stone, we suggest that Jesus is probably a stone worker with some woodwork and some metal work. In other words, we're deconstructing slowly the story of the gospel. What happens to a story when you take it out of its context is you start retelling it in your own context. And all of a sudden, something becomes something else, and it looks completely different. Now, this particular home is unique because this was the home of the baker in Nazareth. I know that because the kataluma, the guest chamber, has an oven in the center. Can you see the basaltic black rocks there over on the flat part? And there's a little area for a chimney and this area of a platform. So this was where the bread was made. You know, I've often wondered, Jesus tells a story about a man who comes and a man knocks on the door in the middle of the night to get bread. I wondered if he was thinking about this house, because I get to stand in it all the time. I always wondered if it's like, if he was thinking back at the 7-Eleven when he was growing up. Because this is kind of like the baker of the organization. By the way, if you saw Fiddler on the Roof, you probably can appreciate that in old Jewish tradition, if you don't have a rabbi in town, but you need advice, you go to the baker. I guess they thought he had a lot of time on his hands. I'm not really sure, but mostly because he did all of his work before they got out of bed. And so they didn't see him work, so they thought, he's sitting around, get advice. But the truth is, what you have is this oven on the inside here. And look at this house. The father would be sleeping here inside the door with the mother and all the children. And that shouldn't be funny to you. Even in this town right now, there are people who sleep in the same room with their parents and have their whole life. I can only tell you that at 10, they know things I didn't know at 10. Because they're in the same room, they're supposed to be sleeping, they may not be sleeping, okay? Enough said. You know, the Talmud said that when you're going to be with your spouse, raise the rug so the children can't watch. I don't exactly know how you do that in this context, but what I'm telling you is everybody eats and sleeps in the same room. They know everything about everybody in the family. There's no such thing as privacy in the context of the New Testament. So in the family, you guys, you become so much a part of each other's lives that it's all one thing. Now, this home helps us with a lot of things. I want you to put somebody like Mary and Joseph here and a couple of kids. I know this is not theirs because it's the baker's home, but can you see the keeping of the house included a small wall that was here and there and an area of dirt with little pits in it, and all of the cookery and cookware and dishes just got stored in the pit that matched the bottom of the pot. The way you held up those rounded pots is you just made a rounded bottom and stuck it in there. Which means, guys, you can't say, honey, I'd help with the dishes, but I don't know where they go. You just look at the bottom, look at the thing, stick it in there. It's not that hard. Look at what you don't have. You don't have cupboards. You have nothing to store. We keep reading into the Bible like they have what we have. They have none of this. This is their home. When you look at the disciples of Jesus, if you saw a guy with an extra pair of sandals, he's rich. I want you to understand how incredibly rich we are. Because a lot of us grow up in a society and we think if we don't have the latest version of whatever, somehow we're the poor kid on the block. Hello? There are people that are right now within 10 miles of where I'm standing, circle, that are hungry tonight. We're not. We get on our air-conditioned bus and drive by them and wave and look curiously and take pictures of them. I don't want you to feel guilty. I just want you to understand the blessing you have. So that when you say, thank you, Lord, for this food, I want you to say, thank you, Lord. Look at this food. I mean, look at what's in front of me. You gave that to me. I could have been the other guy. I didn't do anything special. I'm not smarter, brighter, faster, better look, well, maybe better looking, but I'm not, you know, and here's the bottom line. You gave that to me. Now, there was a conflict that's called the personal conflict of Jesus and his disciples. Go all the way back to John chapter 1. Jesus has 5 followers that come from what evangelistic movement? John the Baptist. Okay, coming from the John the Baptist Evangelistic Movement Incorporated. 5 followers of Jesus come behind him. And John chapter 2, there's a wedding at Cana, right up the road, actually just vertically north, just a little ways. And Jesus is there, and he arrives there, and it says on the 3rd day he arrived at the wedding. And what you're supposed to know is that people in the Bible married on Tuesday. When I say Sunday, I say Yom Rishon, 1st day. Monday, Yom Sheni, 2nd day. Tuesday, Yom Shlishi, 3rd day. It was Tuesday, and Jesus arrived at the wedding. He got there late. There's a 7-day feast, and it says in the Greek there had been a wedding. He missed it. He's there at the tail end of it, and what is his mother doing?
drinks ready.
She's getting drinks ready, okay? She's involved with the family. By the way, many think it may be Bartholomew or Nathaniel's wedding that was going on, and somehow the families are linked together. And what is she doing with Jesus? She's telling him what to do, which is what moms do. You know, it's a wonderful piece of advice that Mary offers. Gets the slaves together and says, whatever Jesus tells you to do, do it. Mark that verse in your Bible. It's a good one. Whatever Jesus tells you to do it. And he's like, woman, what have I to do with you? My hour is not yet come. Sounds like really high King James English. What he's saying is, Mom, this is not the time I planned to do this. But he does do it. What does he do at Cana? Turns water into wine. Now, the interesting thing is, after that, Jesus makes his way for a while in Nazareth, goes down to Capernaum. On a visit up here in Nazareth, he goes to a synagogue. Now, there's such a small village here, and the synagogue has not been discovered, but there's apparently a minyan. That means enough people to actually have a synagogue service. And so they actually come together for synagogue service. And do you remember in Luke chapter 4, it says Jesus came in, and he went into the service, and he turned to the place in the scroll where it is written. Now, wait a minute. You don't turn to the place where you preach the next portion. But he actually had a sermon of his own on his mind. And he turns to a portion in Isaiah, and it says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's called me to preach the gospel to the rich and famous, get rich and start a school and be famous. No, he's called me to preach the gospel to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, to set the captive free. This day, these very words are being done in your hearing. And what did they say? What gracious words proceed out of his mouth. Wait a minute, he didn't say anything gracious. You have to remember that because everybody was educated biblically in the time, he was using what is called a REMEZ, R-E-M-E-Z. A REMEZ is a hint. Let me give you one. If I were to say to you, finish this. For God so loved the world. Okay, I didn't have to finish it for you to already know. Every one of you knew how it ended, because we have in common that verse. So let's just say that Phil and Katie are having trouble here because Katie's just not sharing, and Phil, I don't know what to tell you, it's just the kind of girl she is. She's not sharing, you need a pen, she won't let you use it, and so I say, Katie, it's like for God so loved the world. Now what am I saying? God loved the world, what did he do? Give him the pen, okay? But see, I didn't say it. A remez is when they lift a portion of a verse or a scripture, and you're supposed to know the rest. And you're supposed to get the point, not from what he said or recorded, but from the rest of the portion. Paul does this all the time. It makes you crazy. You start reading and you go, what possible relevance does that verse have to do with his argument? It's not that verse. It's the rest of the portion you're supposed to know. That's what he's talking about. All right. When Jesus comes in and he says, from Isaiah, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, he is mentioning a portion of Isaiah 59, 60, 61, 62. And in that portion, the netzer, the shoot or the branch, will become the place of Messiah. What he does is he walks in and he speaks from the hometown verses of Nazareth in Nazareth. And everybody goes, preach it, brother, we love that. That says we become important. We love us, we love us. And it's like a really great moment in the synagogue. And then he says, listen, you'd like to tell me the things that you just did in Capernaum last week, do them here also. But I have to tell you that even Elijah didn't take care of his own people. I'm not going to do what you tell me as a village. And what do they want to do? They want to throw him off a hill. Now, everybody wants to see the high hill around here, the mount of the precipice or whatever. All they're looking to do is throw him off a hill and stone him until he's dead, because what he's doing is saying, you will not determine what I teach. I cannot do the will of my mother. I must do the will of my father. I can't do the will of my village. Mark chapter 3 says that he went down to Capernaum after a less than successful time in Nazareth where they tried to kill him. And he made his way down there, and his mother and his brothers come to him in Capernaum, and they tell him, Jesus, your mother and brothers are outside. And he says, who is my mother? Who are my brothers? You who follow me are my mother and brothers. Now listen, guys, I'm going to tell you this. In ancient culture, you did not go out and see your mother when she came. And by the way, you don't do it in the Smith home either. When my mom calls, you show up. I misunderstood this one time. She said, if you can make it. Now I know that means if both of your legs are sawn off, crawl on your hands. Okay? Now, here's the thing. He doesn't go out and see his mother. There's something going on. There's been a break in the Nazareth tribal clan of the Netzers. Remember, Nazareth is called Nazareth because the Netzer clan lives here. It gets its name from the people. He is a Netzer. Today, if I want to say I'm Christian, I say I'm Notzria. Notzrim. We are Christians. We are Netzers. But it was originally a clan name. All right, John chapter 7. His brothers come to him. Jesus, we've seen you do some cool things. We've heard all about you. If you want to be known, go with us to the Feast of Tabernacles in Jerusalem. This is the way to get known. We'll be there. We'll hand out tracts. We'll put up a neon sign and say, dink, dink, he's right here. We'll do all that it takes. Come and join us. And he says, I'm not going with you. And he comes up to the feast another way. Can you see what's happening? His family keeps reaching out, but with the reaching out comes control. And he keeps pushing them back and saying, I can't do what you want me to do. Guys, the personal conflict of Jesus is that throughout his life, his family and his followers didn't get along. And what literally happens is there's a break in the relationship. Now, I want you guys to know something. I hope that when my children get to the place that God has a call on their life and they're going away from me, that I can remember that they belong to him before they belong to me. And I want you to understand something. It is a painful thing to not be understood by those who should love you the most and understand you the least. Jesus goes through his life not happy about his family, hurt by his family. When does it ever end? He's on the cross. And he looks down and he sees two people. And through the blood running in his eyes, he sees Mary and John, family and follower. And at the place of reconciliation, he says, it's time for the two of you to reconcile yourselves. Family, look at follower. Follower, look at family. Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. By the way, Mary is not without other son choices or other people to care for her. That's not what's going on there. Fast forward to Acts, and here's what you see. When Jesus appears in the upper room, family and follower are together and they're getting along. Because the place of the reconciliation of things that are broke is the cross. I was in this land when I was sitting in a meeting where an elderly man came forward at the end of a service and introduced the man that killed his father and said, but he is now my brother. The cross is the place where things that are broken that cannot be fixed any other way, that's where they're reconciled. The personal conflict of Jesus is he went through his life without the understanding of those who knew him best. Somebody in this group needs to hear that. You need to know that God's call on your life may be a struggle for those around you. Listen to me, if you are a young person, God honors obedience. But there will come a time when you'll face that struggle and take that step. And when you have to do that, know that your Savior knows what that's like. Maybe God's going to call you to some land and your parents are going to look at you and say, can't you just stay here and minister here? Listen, I was the guy that took the grandchildren 7,000 miles from home into a war zone. It was not a popular move in my family. But I want to tell you something. The safest place on earth for you to be is where God tells you to be. And the most unsafe is anywhere else. Just be careful. I hope that through the personal wound that he carried, you're understanding that Jesus was not this Teflon Jesus that didn't feel anything. Throw it at me, it bounces right off. I'm super Jesus. No, he was a guy who felt hurt. I'm not minimizing God in human skin. I would not do that. It is what my life is pledged to. At the same time, it was a very human man. Hurt Cut him and he bleeds. In this place where you can see his humanity, I want to remind you of something. Jesus was not laying in a manger spinning planets. Philippians 2 said, he emptied himself in order to take on the form of a servant. The way you understand that kenosis term is simply this. I have a hard drive. It's partitioned. I can't access the stuff that I partition unless I move to that section of the drive. He had abilities beyond what he would access, and he willingly did that for us. I don't know your families, and I don't know what hurts go with them. What I do know is I come from a big family, big hurts. And what I can tell you is this, my Jesus understands those hurts. He went through them. It wasn't all he walked through and everybody went, oh, it's Jesus, let us follow him. The Christian movies don't do justice to just how tough it was to be God in human skin. How would you like to be his younger brother? You know, he always got it right. By the way, just because he was God in human skin didn't mean that he always spelled everything right. A mistake is not a sin, okay? I want you to think even further about that. Could he have an upset stomach? If he ate a bad egg, would he get sick? See, his body worked just like you, but we don't picture him that way. When you really start to think about what it would be like to grow up on the playground next to Jesus, I'm not imagining that the first time somebody smacked him was just before he went to the cross. I think you have to remember that he was encamped at nights outside the village of Nazareth with his father, apprenticing stoneworking, working all week to get enough wages to maintain this wonderful, illustrious living they have, eking out an existence. There's a moment that captures my mind. The moment in heaven just before God put on human skin. Think of the step down from there to here. It's a huge step. It's an unimaginable step. To go from being, I can speak and there is light, to not even being able to change my own diaper. I want to tell you something. I work with a lot of older people. The first half of your life, guys, you will believe that you are in control of things. It's an illusion. Because in the second half, you won't control much. Your kids will move away. Your job will run out. Your body will stop doing what you tell it to. And slowly, you will understand the truth of life, which is I was never in control. I just thought I was. And what I can tell you is Jesus went through that process. He went through the process of being totally in control of the universe to not being able to change a diaper. So while I watch people age, I remember that my Savior went through that process as well. Joseph, the stepfather of Jesus, was a builder by trade. The word carpenter is the word tekton, it's builder. When the translator made the King James, a builder was a carpenter, because in his area of the world they made things out of wood. Here we don't make things out of wood, so the chances are good that Jesus did very little woodwork in his life. The term for woodworker is not the term used of Jesus' work. It's the word builder, contractor. And since we build primarily out of stone, he's probably a stonemason. So Jesus' actual home work was probably primarily the cutting of stone and the laying of stone and the making of buildings. Anne Killebrew in her excavation gave to us at Katsarin a gift here because it illustrates the type of building in the region where there's basalt and the kind of craft that Joseph the carpenter, or Joseph the builder more properly, and Jesus his son would have learned to do. Houses throughout the Galilee are made of this hard basalt stone. It's a volcanic rock. It doesn't cleave predictably and it's very difficult to work with, and so construction like this would be a real task. If Jesus were constructing, or Joseph were constructing in an area that was basalt, the most expensive piece of equipment they would have had here would be their scaffolding, because the wood was so incredibly precious and expensive. We don't have the large trees to make it, and to flatten out this wood by hand takes a great deal of time. So they would be very careful about taking their scaffolding from one job to another. The stones around here are worked and put into place, and they use plumb lines in order to make them straight, and use a very simple 2 flasks on a board with water in order to use a level. Some of the small hand tools that are found from that period are represented in this particular dig. In fact, in one case, they even have a set of tongs. In order to lift these heavy weights of stone, they would just drop it down over the stone, and the tongs would pull it together as it picked up, took the stones up to the next level. This home has an open little courtyard, and behind me, an area for the stable, up above the area for living space. And this is a half constructed, and it's meant to be half constructed to show how the construction methods worked at the time of the New Testament and the Talmudic and Byzantine periods that followed it. I've lived about a quarter of my life in the Middle East, and about 1.5 years ago my wife and I were living here in Gilo during the time that there was a lot of shooting between the Palestinian Arabs and the Israelis. There were groups of people infiltrating the community behind me, Beit Jala, which is largely an Arab Christian neighborhood. They were shooting at the area up here, and the Israelis returned fire up into Beit Jala, and my wife and I were up here on the porch. This was before they put in all of our sandbags, and we began to stand here and look out and see that there were so many people suffering just out of our view. And Dottie began to say to me, you know, people that live next door to believers should not be hungry. And out of that single word, the relief ministry for Seek the Lamb was born here in the Middle East. We sought friends that were doing relief work in other places and ministry work in other places, and we joined on to their team to help to build some specific kinds of relief ministry here. First, we got involved in food distribution, and then a lot of baby blankets and diapers and baby formula. Then we were working in medical supplies, and the villages like the one behind me were receiving a lot of their supplies and food during the heaviest part of the fighting. We have avoided staying in the political situation in order to be able to reach people in the spiritual needs of the land. I just wanted to share with you a little bit of our heart as we look at Israelis and Arabs here who are in a situation where the biggest need is not a physical one, but the physical needs are very real. There was a very, very tough time. This year has been very brutal on the lives of some people. At the same time, the spiritual needs are much, much greater. And so here amidst busy cities, there are people who are walking in emptiness and need the good news.